We move now to an abundance of Andrews, we'll go with, and welcome Senator Andrew Bragg. Andrew is the Shadow Assistant Minister for Home Ownership. Andrew is a Liberal Senator for New South Wales. Since first being elected to the Senate in 2019, Andrew has been active on policy in superannuation, technology, financial regulation and housing. Andrew's advocacy has been guided by his belief that the basis for a fair society is a strong economy. Before entering Parliament, Andrew works as an accountant at Ernst & Young, going on to hold senior positions at the Financial Services Council and the Business Council of Australia. Andrew grew up in Shepparton, Victoria. After secondary school, Andrew completed a Bachelor of International Relations and a Master of Business Accounting at ANU. He then completed a Master of Financial Regulation at Macquarie University. Welcome, Senator Bragg.
Thanks very much. Now, I don't have the same level of qualifications as the last speaker, who has many more degrees, but hopefully this will be just as interesting as Dr. Lee's address. And it's a good opportunity for us to reflect on the fact that so many of us in Parliament do try and work together on things of common interest and of national advantage. Often you see profiled in the media all the times where we're engaging in an uncivilised, sometimes even degrading fashion. But there are many opportunities for us to be collegiate, and particularly in this portfolio, which is not my portfolio today. I will make some remarks about housing. But I did want to say at the outset, I've had the great benefit in my life of attending a Catholic school in Shepparton and also attending a Dominican University College in Canberra at the ANU. So it's been a big part of my life, and I thank you for the work you do for our community. As members of Parliament, we do get to do a lot of engagement with religious organisations, and we get to see firsthand the extent of work that you do for the community from all array of social and community services. So I just wanted to say thank you for what you do for our society. And today I will make some remarks about housing. And at the outset, it's obvious to all of you, of course, that a house is more than just an economic opportunity for someone. That is, of course, the bedrock of a family. And we have been a nation of homeowners since the Second World War in the main. And that has been important for Australian families economically, but also from a social point of view. And I would say in modern parlance from a psychological viewpoint, because having a home of your own gives you great certainty and security that you can progress with your family, whatever family status you may have. And that's why home ownership is so important. And that is why we are very concerned that we are on a trajectory for millennials and Gen Zs in particular, that too many of these people will never own their own home. And that trajectory that we've been on for so long since the Second World War, that most Australians do own a house, is slipping away from these younger generations. And these people feel that they've done the right thing. They've done a trade, they've been to university, they've got a good job, they're working hard, they might even have a partner who's doing the same, and they still can't crack that deposit and still can't crack that first mortgage. And that is why when you look at the things that are of great importance to younger people, this is coming up again and again, survey after survey. And so that's why we've put great emphasis on our housing policy as a federal opposition and as the Liberal National Coalition for the election to be held hopefully in the next few weeks. And you may say, well, a lot of these things are to be resolved by the state governments and local governments. But if you go back and you look at the history of home ownership since, again, the Second World War, the national government has played a role here in supporting that objective, because understanding that's a great national priority. So if you want to solve the housing crisis, you've got to start by building more homes. And that will have a flow-on impact to anyone who has an interest in the sector, whether you are in the social or affordable space or the public housing space, or you're just in the regular housing space. More houses is necessary to solve the problem. And to put some numbers on this, the country needs to be building about 250,000 houses a year, okay? 250,000 a year. This year, we'll get about 170,000 houses. When I say houses, I mean dwellings, apartments, everything. So we're down to 170,000. Under the last government, we were building on average 195,000 houses a year. And now we're down to 170. So we've got to get back to 250. So in order to do that, we have to harness all the efforts of the private economy, the market. We've got to get builders and tradespeople and developers building houses. There's no possible way that I can stand here today as one of your representatives and promise that the government of Australia can solve this problem on its own. It can't. Even if you had a Housing Australia Future Fund with $100 billion in it, you still couldn't solve the problem as a government. You need to get the tradespeople, the builders, the developers to help solve this problem. And I say with great pride that when I travel around the country, I often meet with religious organisations that are actually finding ways to support this objective through your significant land holdings and through your significant capital advantages and tax advantages. It is possible for your sector to help us get those 250,000 houses that we need each and every year if we are to solve the nation's housing problem. So our policies for the upcoming election on the supply side will be very simple. Firstly, we will be pausing any changes to the National Construction Code for 10 years. That recognises that the cost of building is too high. It is uneconomic for many apartment builders to build apartments here in the city. They cannot make it work. So cutting costs is important. We will also have a $5 billion supply fund. And the reason for that is that if you want to build an apartment building today in Sydney, you probably have to build the apartment building plus the sewerage, plus the road, plus the street lights, plus the footpath, plus the nature strip, plus, right? Now, last time I looked, a builder or a developer was supposed to be building a house and trying to sell it at a reasonable profit to a person who can afford to buy it on an average wage. The objective here is to get an average wage owner to be able to afford a house in this country. Now, you go back 20 years and you could buy a house at 3 times the multiple of an average salary. Now you're looking at 14, 15 times. 14, 15 times. One of the reasons is that we are asking the market to subsume the cost of public infrastructure into their housing developments. And so we are going to step up with a federal contribution to provide that last mile infrastructure so that the builders can build houses and sell them at a reasonable price to consumers. We'll also be looking to recalibrate migration because although I'm sure you agree with me that if you have a sore back or something, I actually have a sore back at the moment, I can highly recommend going to a yoga teacher. But we've had the government bring in more yoga teachers than they have brought in builders and tradespeople in the last few years. And that's because the government have told them, the CFMEU have told the government they're not allowed to bring in tradespeople from other countries because they probably won't join the CFMEU. And so that's why we've had all these fantastic yoga teachers come in. And this is not casting any aspersions. I'm just making the comparison that right now we're in a building crisis, housing crisis, and we desperately need more people who can help us build houses. And we'll also look at the viability of apprenticeships. We think that's also very important that, you know, it's a good thing for people to do an apprenticeship, to be a builder or to be a sparky or to be a plumber. When I went to school in Shepparton, most people did that. I mean, it was unusual to go to university. And I think it's a good thing that we can encourage people to do a trade if that's what they want to do. But we've got to make it viable for them. I mean, the taxpayer underwrites university education significantly. So I think it's reasonable that we should try and help people be tradespeople if they want to, and noting that we are in a national housing crisis. So on the supply side, we will freeze the construction code, we will have the supply fund, we will recalibrate migration, and we will ensure that apprenticeships are viable. Look, we'll also look at the environmental laws, the federal environmental laws. I mean, it doesn't seem reasonable to me that if a parrot flew by a block of land in 1971, that you shouldn't be able to build a house there today. I mean, some of the ridiculous rulings that you see from this government, you know, a snake's on the ground or there was a magpie there 20 years ago. I mean, give me a break. I mean, we desperately need to build houses so that young people, particularly millennials and Zoomers, have somewhere to live. Because I can assure you, if the NIMBYism and the environmental zealots win this argument, then the young people of today will never be able to live in the same suburb as their own family. We can say goodbye to that, because every time an apartment building gets vetoed by some obscure environmental law, or every time a local council gives into NIMBYism, the person who's paying the price is not the baby boomer, it's the millennial or the Gen Z. They are the people that will pay the price. Fewer houses is bad for young people. And I understand that a lot of people get angry about the prospect of new development, but this is the reality we're in. These people are living in the country. We brought in 1 million people in the last 2 years alone. They've got to be housed. So NIMBYism is poison for young people. On the demand side, we will recalibrate lending to make it easier for first home buyers, and we'll open up superannuation for first home buyers. We think the key test of your success in retirement is your housing status, not your superannuation balance. Now, all the lobbyists of the super funds are desperate to commission all sorts of dodgy research papers to tell us the sky will fall in and Australia will fall into the sea very soon if superannuation is opened up for housing. But at the same time, these people want to use your money in super to invest in housing themselves. So they're actually massively invested in Australian residential property themselves as institutions, but they want to ban people from using their own money to get that elusive first house. So that is, I would say, really disgusting and ugly advocacy from the super funds there. And so we want to give people the choice. Give people the choice. We are the party of choice, and that will be a choice that will be available to people if we win the election. Now, on the community housing front, many of you know that we established NIFIC, which is now called Housing Australia, and we established the bond aggregator, which has supported a number of community housing providers to develop new opportunities for people, and that's something that we think is important going forward. We are not in favour of the Housing Australia Future Fund. That is something that we would abolish if we win, but we are open to suggestions about what could be done to support the ongoing federal capacity here for community housing. As I say, we established NIFIC, we developed the bond aggregator. We've also been open to innovative ideas like the Home Guarantee Scheme, which was another innovation of the coalition government, and frankly, we'll take a pragmatic approach. But what we won't be doing is establishing a Canberra bureaucracy and appointing a board of our mates to go away and spend years and years looking at pieces of paper, shuffling around papers from Peter to Paul, and not doing anything. We are in a housing crisis, and if the federal government is going to spend any money, it needs to go out the door quickly. I mean, the Housing Australia Future Fund has $10 billion and it's bought 300 houses bought. Make the point that they've been bought, not built. So I would say after 18 months of operation, it's a pretty bad return when we're living through a massive housing crisis. Younger Australians are desperately needing their governments to be successful and to establish new housing. As I said, it is impossible for any government of any colour or stripe to solve the housing crisis without private builders, private tradespeople, private developers. So the thrust of our policy in moving the needle of new houses up to 250,000 is on those people, because we know that can help. We are not enamoured with bureaucracy, we're not enamoured with unions, and we will look to find ways to work with you and your members to support an ongoing investment into community housing. We've always supported public housing, and we are still very open to how that can be achieved, but it will not be subject to the creation of a massive new bureaucracy in Canberra. So think about how we can help on that front. You could look at the supply fund, you could look at what Housing Australia might be able to do. We're very open to suggestions there. So I wanted to leave you with the sense that the door is very open, but I wanted to be very clear about what we will, what we won't do. Most of our housing policies have already been announced. There are some things still yet to be finally calibrated and announced. I'm very happy to take your comments or questions on that or anything else.
So taking up Andrew's invitation, comments and questions. One, Ron to the far right.
not that far right. But my question is in regard to things like, in your talk about home ownership.
Yep.
Our state governments, I think, are addicted to stamp duty.
Yeah.
And if you were looking at a premium cost of a deposit of a house, stamp duty is a huge factor in that. And I know, for example, here in New South Wales, they've done measures where you're sort of lifelong taxed if you don't want to pay the upfront stamp duty. So how can we force, or how could you compel, well, how can we compel state governments to do anything, but this addiction to stamp duty and not even consider halving it or something of that order?
Well, thank you very much. Complaining about the states is like complaining about the Swiss Alps. And the Labor government in Canberra at the moment have a policy to pay states to build houses, and the states are refusing to do so. So I don't think you can buy your way out of that problem. I think you're right, they are addicted to that. And frankly, we're living through a period of very low ambition. And there is not a policy that is proposing a structural fix to that issue, which is that the states are reliant on very inefficient taxation. And that is regrettable. And I'm sorry that we're living through this very low level of ambition era. What I would say is that the state government needs to fix it itself. And in the last Liberal National administration here in New South Wales, you may be aware that the government actually legislated a policy where you could amortise your stamp duty over a number of years, thereby removing the hit on a young person wanting to buy that first house, having to pay stamp duty up front. One of the first things the Minns government did when it was elected was it abolished that scheme. So, I mean, as I said about Andrew Lee, he's a good bloke. I mean, I think Chris Minns has said some really great things about housing, and I really hope he's successful. But I fear that his agencies and his tax policies are not really supporting his agenda here. And in fact, the data shows that we're going backwards in New South Wales. So, look, when people come to talk to me about housing, many of them want to talk to me about issues that are within the preserve of the local and the state governments. That is one of those, and it's frankly not one that we can fix from Canberra. But having said that, if we are elected and we are going to be developing this $5 billion supply fund, we will use the supply fund to smash down on NIMBYism and to ensure that states and local governments are approving projects. If we're going to put money on the table, then we're going to make sure that they are building, because we cannot control the state stamp duty addiction. But we can use our moral position, particularly as a provider of funds, that NIMBYism is poison.
Thank you, Andrew. Kathy, down here. Kathy Utrich from the Archdiocese of Brisbane. I'm just wondering if you're familiar with, and I'm giving a paper on this tomorrow at this conference, your focus on NIMBYism. I'm not sure whether you're aware of the new policy that the new government in Queensland brought in, which I've colloquially called Yes in Faith Backyard. Which basically, as you rightly pointed out, it's a state and local government issue, some of the barriers to building social and affordable housing. I'm just wondering, first of all, if you're across that particular policy that we pitched to the opposition at the time, and then they brought it in as their policy when they won government. And also, if you obviously you can't hang around for tomorrow, but I'm happy to brief you on another day on that. And the second thing was, I just want to challenge you on with the new Queensland state government has actually addressed the stamp duty issue in a small way, in that there is going to be no stamp duty on any on first home buyers.
So just to clarify, did you say yes? What did you say before? Yes in
Well, it came from yes in my backyard, and I twisted it to yes in Faith's backyard,
Yeah, I thought you said
which
that, yeah.
means being able to has an as-of right to build social and affordable housing on faith-based land.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be briefed on that if you'd like to organise that. Rob Stokes, who's a former minister in the Liberal government here in Sydney, has been involved with the Faith Housing Initiative. And I think that's a very easy way for us to make really big gains, which, frankly, at a time when building is, look, I understand that this is not a room full of property developers, so you may have found my comments to be a bit odd, but part of that is also recognising that the costs are so high, taxes are so high, half the cost of a new house goes in taxes and regulation, that it's uneconomic for so many people to build. So, which is evidenced in the fact that the group of companies that are leading the nation's insolvency figures are builders and developers. So if there is arbitrage, which I think there is with the Faith housing option, then frankly, I think the nation should avail itself of it. So I'm positive on that because I think it might be the best way for us to bridge the gap quickly because it's more viable. It could be more viable than a private organisation having to pay a lot of taxation. On the second issue of Queensland, I mean, I think it's great they've done that. And as I said to you before, it was the same, very similar here at this state, but unfortunately, Chris Minns has wound that back. So my view is, and I've now watched federal politics for quite a long time, is that it's a fool's errand to spend all your time in Canberra. I mean, who knows how long you're going to be doing one of these jobs for, trying to get the states to do something. I think you've got to make the point to them that the states have got to make sure their own backyard is tidy, and you can use moral pressure to try and get them there, but you've really got to focus on what you can control. And so if you're the Commonwealth Government, you've got the banking policy, you've got the superannuation, you've got migration, you've got skills policy, you've got payments to states. So those are sort of your main levers you've got. You're not approving DAs and you're not collecting stamp duty. So we've tried to focus on what we can control with this housing policy, and we think that it's a better option than what the others are offering. But look, the great thing about democracy is people will have a smorgasbord at this election on housing. You can have the Greens political party. Their policy is that there should be a government property developer, and apparently that property developer is going to build 250,000 houses a year, so it's going to be good living here in the Soviet Union if they win. Then you've got Labor, which is very big on, you know, their sort of bureaucratic approach they have, and then they've got all the super funds that they'd like to work with. And then ours is very much recognising that tradespeople, builders and developers largely are going to be required to deliver this problem. And you can't have a whole bunch of demand-side solutions. You've got to have mainly supply-side solutions, because unless you build more, you can't solve it.
Just as a follow-up
Yep.
to that, and the Commonwealth's role in what we've been able to achieve in Queensland,
Yeah.
I was able to brief the new Housing Minister, Claire O'Neill, not long after they brought that in at another CSSA conference last year. And her response to that was basically, I think she announced the next round of the HAF funding was made specifically available for faith-based organisations, social and affordable housing.
Okay, thank you.
One more from Anne, I think.
Thanks, Andrew. It's Anne Kerwin from Catholic Care Canberra. I'm not feeling much love from you, but I can tell you that Canberra is a beautiful place to live, work and raise a family. What I'm curious about is you've spoken quite a lot about home owners and future home owners, but
Yep.
the majority of organisations here in the room work with people who are more in the social and affordable space who will never own their own homes. We know that there's over 122,000 people every night in Australia who sleep homeless. So I'm curious to hear what your response will be in terms of meeting that demand for homes for people in the social and affordable space in terms of policy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you know, the majority of Australians do live in private houses, and so that's where the bulk of our policy is going. But we will have an agenda to support community housing providers, as we have in the past. And as I said in my remarks, we established NIFIC and we established the bond aggregator. And I think that's been, as far as I can see, that's been a successful program. I get a lot of good feedback about that. And then we will look to fund some of these ongoing needs through the budget. So we're not going to have the Housing Australia Future Fund. If we win, we will abolish that. But we recognise that ongoing funding can be provided through the budget directly. And as I said to you before, one of the reasons is we don't like the idea of creating an organisation, giving it a board, you know, it's sort of taking forever to do things. We'd just rather fund things through the budget quickly. We don't have time to waste. I mean, the HAF has been, look, I understand that there'll be people in the room that think the HAF has been fantastic, but I can assure you that while the intentions may have been good and pure, it's taken forever to get going. I mean, the Prime Minister announced the HAF was going to build 13,000 new houses back in September. Contracts for about 1,000 of those have been signed, and now we're in almost April. So it's taken 18 months to do nothing other than sign about 20 contracts, and we just don't think it's a good approach. So we will support the sector. I meet with the sector regularly in Canberra. I do like being in Canberra. I lived there for 4 years. And as I said to you, I can't be any more open than, you know, we'll talk to the sector and see what they think will work best. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you a bunch of lies that we're going to promise to do something we're never going to do. I mean, we're going to change the program if we win, because we don't think that's been a successful approach. It doesn't mean the support for the sector isn't going to be there. It just won't be done in that way.
I'd like to thank Andrew for joining us today. And two of the things that I particularly have taken away from his remarks: one, reminding us again of the importance of house and home in an economic, social, psychological and lots of other senses. And two, the complexity of the housing so-called crisis that has supply and demand elements, and the important place that we as faith-based organisations and providers do play and can continue to play in that. On all of our behalves, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.